At my husband's funeral, they treated me like I was broke. I never mentioned the $28 million. These words echoed in my mind. As I sat quietly at the back of the chapel, the whispers of the people around me barely registering. The room was filled with grief, but not mine. No, mine had been drowned out by the cold indifference of my own flesh and blood. They all stood there, pretending to mourn, but I knew the truth. My family, the people I had spent my life caring for, had no real interest in my loss. They were more concerned about the money, the inheritance, the house my husband and I had built together over the years. The tension in the room was palpable. My son, Michael, stood near the front, looking down at his shoes. His wife, Janet, kept her eyes trained on the floor, avoiding any kind of eye contact. They had all made their positions clear in the weeks leading up to this moment. They treated me like I didn't matter, like I wasn't worthy of even a kind word. And in the middle of all this, I was the one left to pick up the pieces. As the funeral service continued, I could feel the weight of their stares, the way their voices lowered when they spoke to me. They all thought they knew what I was going through, but none of them truly understood. My husband, John, had been my world for over 40 years. We had raised 2 children together, built a life, and faced every challenge side by side. But now, as I sat there, I realized just how little they had ever appreciated what I had done for them. I wasn't just the mother of their children, the wife of their father. I was the one who had held this family together, and now, I was being cast aside. The service ended, and as the family gathered outside, I noticed the way they all huddled together, whispering. I could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they sized me up like I was some kind of charity case. My son, Michael, was the first to speak to me as I approached. His voice was cold, distant. "Mom, you should think about selling the house. It's too much for you to handle on your own." I looked at him, shocked. This wasn't the son I had raised. This wasn't the man who had once come to me with his problems, the one who had sought my advice. "Michael, this house is as much mine as it is yours," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. "Your father and I worked hard for this. I'm not selling." But he didn't listen. Neither did Janet. They had made up their minds. They wanted the money. They wanted to sell the house, liquidate everything, and move on with their lives. I could see it in their eyes. They had no use for me anymore. I wasn't just a mother to them. I was a nuisance. As they drove away, I stood there, alone, in front of the house we had built, the house that had once been filled with laughter, love, and memories. It was now just a symbol of everything I had lost. But I wasn't about to give up without a fight. I had worked too hard, given too much. And as I stood there, watching them drive off into the distance, I knew one thing for sure. They had underestimated me. The $28 million wasn't just some number in a bank account. It was my dignity, my legacy, and I would protect it, even if it meant losing everything else. I wasn't broken. I wasn't helpless. I had fought for everything I had in this life, and I wasn't about to let them take it all away. The next day, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the quiet house. The aroma of coffee filled the air, but it couldn't mask the emptiness. I had always imagined that after John's passing, the house would feel different. It didn't. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't new. For years, I had kept this house alive, filling it with memories, laughter, and love. Now, it was just a shell, a reminder of everything that had been taken from me. Michael and Janet hadn't been in touch since yesterday's conversation. They were busy with their own lives, as always. I couldn't help but wonder if they were discussing how best to get their hands on what they thought was rightfully theirs. I had spent the day alone, thinking about the years I had given to my family, thinking about how quickly they turned their backs on me. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't even the money. It was the respect, the love. All of it had been stripped away. I had dedicated my life to them, and now, they didn't even care enough to check on me. The realization hit me hard. I was alone, not just in the house, but in this world. The people I loved the most had forgotten about me. I reached for my phone and called the lawyer. It felt like an eternity before he picked up. "Patricia," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "I've been going over the will, and I wanted to make sure you understand your position." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "I've been thinking about it." The lawyer paused. I could hear him shuffling papers. "There's something I need to bring to your attention. There's more to John's estate than you're aware of." My heart skipped a beat. I had already known about the house, the savings, and a few other assets. But something in his tone told me there was more. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There's a sum of money, Patricia, he said. A significant amount. It's in a separate account. My mind raced. How much? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. 28 million, he said, the words hanging in the air. I felt the blood rush to my head. My knees weakened, but I held myself together. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. $28 million. And not once had they mentioned it. Not once had anyone bothered to tell me about it. Where is it? I asked, trying to steady my voice. It's in a secure account, under your name. Your husband set it up a few years ago. It's all documented, and it's yours. Thank you, I said quietly, and hung up. I sat there, the weight of it sinking in. $28 million. It was almost too much to comprehend. But then I thought of Michael and Janet, and the way they had treated me. How they had assumed that I was just a burden, someone to be discarded when the time was right. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. The view was the same as it had always been. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow over the backyard. It was beautiful, and for a moment, I felt a sense of calm. But that calm was fleeting. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. Not without a fight. They had underestimated me. They thought I was weak, but they were wrong. I wasn't about to give up my dignity, my legacy, or my wealth without making sure they knew what they had done. I had spent years building this life, and I wasn't going to let anyone destroy it. The thought of confronting Michael and Janet, of finally telling them what I knew, made my heart race. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of them, not of anything. They were the ones who should be scared now. I had a plan, and I would make sure they understood just how wrong they were to think I was an easy target. They had no idea what they were up against. The days after that phone call felt like a blur. I had gone through the motions, pretending to be the same woman everyone had known for years. The one who smiled through every hardship. The one who wiped away every tear without a word. But now, as I moved through my empty house, it all felt different. I had never felt so alone, yet so empowered at the same time. The realization of the money, the hidden $28 million, had shifted something inside me. I wasn't the helpless woman they thought I was. I wasn't the frail, forgotten mother or wife. I was stronger than that, and I was about to make sure they knew it. I spent the next few days organizing my thoughts, planning my next move. I knew what I had to do. Michael and Janet were going to be shocked when they found out that I wasn't going to just roll over and let them take everything. The house, the inheritance, the assets, all of it was mine, not theirs. But I had to be strategic. I couldn't just confront them out of anger or bitterness. I needed them to realize their mistake without me having to say a word. So, I began with small steps. I called my lawyer, making sure all the documents for the $28 million were in order. I needed to be ready. Then, I went to the bank. It was a surreal experience. Walking into that building, knowing I held the key to something so powerful, something that could change everything, was both thrilling and terrifying. I met with a bank officer, who confirmed the details of the account. The money was there, untouched. I could do whatever I wanted with it. As I left the bank, I couldn't help but think about Michael. About Janet. They had always treated me like I was insignificant, like I was just an old woman waiting to be put out to pasture. But what they didn't realize was that I had been quietly building my own strength. I had been patient, waiting for the right moment to take control of my life. That moment had come. The next evening, I invited Michael and Janet over for dinner. They hesitated, but eventually agreed, knowing there was something I wanted to discuss. I could tell they were nervous. They had no idea what was coming. As they sat down at the dining table, I couldn't help but watch them closely. Michael kept shifting in his seat, and Janet, who normally had a sharp tongue, was unusually quiet. I knew they had been expecting a confrontation, but I wasn't going to give them what they wanted. Instead, I served dinner just like I always had, carefully, with the same attention to detail that I had given them all these years. We ate in silence for a while, the tension thick in the air. Finally, I broke the silence. I've been thinking about everything, I said, my voice calm but firm. Michael and Janet looked at each other, then back at me. I know what you two have been up to, I continued, keeping my gaze steady. Michael's face turned pale, and Janet shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. But I wasn't finished. And I'm not going to let you take what's mine, I said, locking eyes with them. I've been silent long enough. You think I didn't know about the $28 million? You think I didn't know about the plans to sell the house? The color drained from their faces. Michael opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Janet looked like she was about to speak, but then she thought better of it. I smiled, a small, knowing smile. The house, the money, it's all mine, I said, my voice steady. And you won't take it from me. Michael's expression shifted from shock to something else, something I couldn't quite read. Janet, however, was clearly panicked now. She had underestimated me. They both had. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how they could fix this, how they could make it all go away. But it was too late. I had already made my decision. They were no longer in control. I was. The dinner continued in awkward silence after that. Neither Michael nor Janet knew how to respond. But I didn't care. I had finally taken a stand. The tables had turned. And now, I was in charge. The days following that dinner were a mixture of silence and tension. Michael and Janet didn't reach out, but I knew they were talking. I could feel the shift in the air. Things were different now. I had shown them that I wasn't someone they could push around, that I wasn't just some old woman waiting for her inheritance. I had always been the caretaker, the one who made sure everyone was taken care of. Now, I was the one who needed to make sure I was taken care of. As the week went on, I noticed the small changes in the way Michael and Janet acted when they did finally speak to me. They weren't as dismissive as they had been before. They weren't as confident. It was subtle, but it was there. They were beginning to realize that I wasn't just going to sit back and let them take what was mine. One afternoon, Janet called. Her voice was tight, forced. "We need to talk," she said, the words hanging in the air. I could tell she was uncomfortable. "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "About the house," she said. I could almost hear her fidgeting on the other end of the line. "We think it might be best if we sit down and figure out how to move forward. You know, with everything that's happened." "I don't need you to tell me what's best for me," I replied, my voice steady. "I've made my decision." There was a long pause. I could hear Janet breathing, unsure of what to say next. I wasn't sure what she expected from me, but it wasn't this. She was used to being the one in control, the one making the decisions. Now, the power had shifted, and it wasn't going to be easy for her to take that back. "Patricia," she started, her voice softer now, "we're just trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, a small laugh escaping my lips. "You mean control? You've always been about control, Janet. You've always made sure everything was done your way. But not anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Janet had no response. She had nothing left to say. I could almost picture her, standing there, trying to figure out how to fix the mess they had created. But there was no fixing it now. The truth was out. They had underestimated me. And now, they were paying the price. That night, I sat in the living room, the house quiet around me. I thought about all the years I had spent taking care of everyone else. All the times I had put my needs last, always making sure Michael and Janet had everything they wanted. But now, I realized I had been neglecting my own worth. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy, that I had forgotten what it was like to fight for myself. And now, as I sat there, alone in the quiet house, I knew it was time for me to take control. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house. It was about my dignity, my peace, my future. I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. "I want to make sure everything is in order," I said. "I need to know that I'm protected, that they can't take anything from me." My lawyer reassured me that everything was set, that my assets were secure. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I didn't need Michael or Janet. I didn't need their approval, their validation. I had spent so many years being the one who held everything together, the one who kept the family functioning. But now, it was my turn to take care of myself. As the days passed, I began to feel more and more at peace. I still had the house, the money, and most importantly, I had my pride. I wasn't going to let them strip that away from me. It was clear now that they had been waiting for me to fall, waiting for me to give in to their demands. But I wasn't going to let that happen. They had pushed me to the edge, but I wasn't going to break. I was stronger than they had ever given me credit for, and I was going to make sure they understood that. It had been a few days since the conversation with Michael and Janet. The silence between us had become thick, almost suffocating. I could tell they were trying to figure out how to get back in control, but I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I had been patient long enough. Now, it was time to take charge of my life and protect everything I had worked so hard for. I spent my days planning, thinking about what steps I needed to take next. There were still many things I needed to do. I knew Michael and Janet would try to undermine me, to twist the situation to make it look like I was being unreasonable. But I wasn't going to let them. One morning, I woke up early, the house still and quiet. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft light over the living room. I sat in my favorite chair, sipping my coffee, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had always been the one to take care of everyone. I had always put my family's needs before my own. But now, for the first time in my life, I was focusing on what I needed. I had spent so many years being the good wife, the good mother, the one who held the family together. But now, I was going to stand up for myself. Michael and Janet had underestimated me. They thought they could take advantage of my silence, my willingness to sacrifice. They were wrong, and I was going to show them just how wrong they were. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Michael. His voice was strained, hesitant. "Mom," he began, "we need to talk." I could hear the tension in his voice. I had been expecting this. He wanted to fix things, to try and convince me that they were in the right. But I wasn't interested in their apologies. "I'm listening," I said, my tone calm. "I know things have been tense," Michael continued, "but I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. We need to figure out what's going to happen with the house, with everything." I could hear Janet in the background, her voice faint, but I didn't need to hear her to know what was going on. They were trying to find a way to get back into my good graces, to manipulate me into agreeing with them. But I wasn't going to fall for it. "Michael," I said, cutting him off, "I've made my decision. The house is mine. The money is mine. And I'm not selling, not giving anything up." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear him trying to process what I had just said. I wasn't sure what he had expected, but it wasn't this. "Mom," he finally said, his voice quieter now, "I'm just trying to make things easier for you." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Easier for me?" I repeated. "You're not the one who has to live with the consequences of your actions. You don't get to decide what's easy for me." Michael didn't respond. I could tell he was taken aback. He wasn't used to me standing up for myself like this. "I don't need your help," I continued, my voice firm. "I've been doing just fine on my own, and I'll continue to do so. But don't think for a second that you can walk all over me." The line went silent again. I could feel the weight of the conversation, the tension building, but I didn't care. This was my moment. This was my time to take control. After a long pause, Michael finally spoke. "I don't know what to say, Mom," he said, his voice small. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I could hear the guilt in his voice, but it was too little, too late. "It's not about you, Michael," I replied. "It's about me. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first. But I'm done with that now." He didn't respond right away. I could hear him sigh, and I knew. This conversation was over. He had nothing left to say. He knew he couldn't manipulate me anymore. "Goodbye, Michael," I said softly, before hanging up the phone. I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of relief. I had done it. I had stood up for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I had the power. Not Michael. Not Janet. Me. I wasn't going to let them take anything from me. I had worked too hard for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let them destroy it. The days ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be more challenges, more moments when they would try to push me back into the role of the passive, forgotten mother. But I was ready. I wasn't going to be that woman anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone treat me like I was invisible. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let go of it. Days passed, and the silence between me and Michael grew heavier. Janet stayed out of the picture, letting Michael try to clean up the mess they had both created. I could see the cracks in their plan, the realization slowly dawning on them that I was not going to bend. I was no longer the woman they could manipulate, the quiet mother waiting for their approval. My life was mine to control, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The more I thought about the future, the more determined I became. I was done being a passive participant in my own life. I had spent too many years taking a back seat, watching as others made the decisions. I wasn't going to let that happen again. The phone rang one afternoon. It was Michael, of course. His voice was guarded, like he wasn't sure how to approach me anymore. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I didn't respond right away. I had to think about this. I wasn't sure I wanted to engage in another conversation where they tried to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. But I knew it was coming. All right, I said, my voice firm but calm. We can talk. There was a brief silence before Michael spoke again, his words rushed. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about the house and everything. I know we've been at odds, but I don't want things to stay like this. I want us to be a family again. I could almost hear the guilt in his voice, but I wasn't going to let that sway me. Not anymore. Michael, I said slowly. I'm not interested in pretending everything is okay when it's not. You and Janet have made it clear how little you respect me, and I won't allow that. I've made my decision. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he wasn't expecting this. What decision? He asked, though he must have already known. I'm not selling the house. The money, the property, it's all mine, I replied. I've worked too hard for it to just give it up because you and Janet think you're entitled to it. This isn't about what's easiest for you. It's about what's best for me. Another silence. I could feel the tension building, the words unsaid hanging in the air between us. Michael was struggling with this. He didn't know how to process the fact that his mother, the woman he had always taken for granted, wasn't bending to his will anymore. Mom, I didn't mean for it to get this way, Michael finally said, his voice softening. I thought you'd want to move on, that you'd want to make things easier for yourself. And you thought wrong. I replied, my voice steady. I don't need you or Janet telling me what's best for me. I've spent my entire life putting everyone else first. But now, I'm putting myself first. There was no response. I didn't expect one. I knew that Michael wasn't used to hearing me talk like this, to hear me stand up for myself. But I had to make him understand. I wasn't going to be the woman they walked all over anymore. I wasn't going to let them push me aside. I'm done with this conversation, Michael, I said, my tone final. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to tell me what I should do with my life. I'm going to live it on my terms. I understand, he said quietly. I didn't know if he truly did, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I had made it clear that I was no longer willing to play by their rules. I had drawn a line in the sand, and there was no crossing it. The rest of the conversation was brief and awkward. Michael apologized again, but the words felt hollow, like he wasn't truly sorry for what had happened, just for the way things were turning out. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong. I felt like myself again. The days that followed were quiet. Michael didn't reach out again, and Janet stayed silent. I knew they were trying to figure out what to do next, but I wasn't worried. They had no power over me anymore. I had already made my decision, and it wasn't up for debate. I was done being a passive participant in my own life. I had spent too many years being quiet, being overlooked. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone decide my future for me. I had the strength to take control, and I was going to use it. The silence stretched on for days, thickening between me and Michael, between me and Janet. I could feel them watching me, waiting for me to break, for me to show some sign of weakness. But I didn't. I had made up my mind. The house, the money, everything I had spent my life building, it was mine. No one was going to take it from me. It was a strange feeling, this power, this control. For years, I had been the one who gave, the one who sacrificed. I had put everyone else first, especially my family. But now, I was putting myself first. The phone rang again one afternoon. It was Michael, of course. I could tell by the tone of his voice that he had been thinking about our last conversation. Mom, can we meet? He asked. There's a lot we need to discuss. I could hear the tension in his voice. He didn't know what to expect anymore. He had expected me to cave, to give in to the pressure, to let him and Janet dictate my future. But I wasn't that woman anymore. What is there to discuss? I replied, keeping my voice steady. You and Janet made your position clear. I made mine clear. There's nothing more to say. It's not like that, Mom, Michael said, his voice softening. We just want to make sure we're doing the right thing. We don't want things to stay like this. I'm not interested in being fixed, I said firmly. You don't get to decide what's right for me. I've spent my whole life doing what's best for everyone else. Now, I'm doing what's best for me. There was a long pause. I could feel Michael's uncertainty. He was used to me being the one who made the peace, the one who kept everything together. But now, I wasn't going to play that role anymore. I understand that you're upset, Michael finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. But this doesn't have to be like this. We can all figure something out. No. I replied, my voice sharp. This is exactly how it's going to be. I'm not selling the house. I'm not giving up the money. And I'm not going to pretend everything is okay when it's not. Michael didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear the frustration building in him. He didn't know how to handle me now. I wasn't the weak, quiet woman he had once taken advantage of. I don't know what you want me to say, Mom, he finally said, sounding defeated. I just want you to understand that we've been trying to help. Help? I repeated, my voice cold. No, Michael. You've been trying to control me. And I'm done with it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Michael didn't know what to say. And frankly, I didn't care. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for him to figure it out. I had made my decision. And that was final. I'm done with this conversation, I said, my voice firm. You and Janet can do whatever you want. But I'm not going to be a part of it anymore. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. It was different now. The weight that had been hanging over me for so long was gone. I had stood up for myself. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and I wasn't going to let anyone cross it. The days that followed were still tense, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew they would try to find a way to regain control, but it didn't matter. I had the upper hand now. I had the power. Michael and Janet didn't know how to handle someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for themselves. They didn't know how to handle me now that I wasn't willing to be pushed around. It was liberating. I spent the next few weeks focusing on myself. I took long walks in the morning, spent time with friends, and did things I had never taken the time to do before. It felt good, this freedom. The house was still empty, but it didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. I was taking control of my life, and it was a feeling I hadn't known I needed. I was finally living for myself. And that was enough. Weeks went by, and the weight of the situation didn't lift. It was like everything was on pause, with Michael and Janet still lingering in the background, trying to figure out their next move. They had no idea that the game had already changed. I was done being the one who followed their lead, the one who took their demands in stride. I wasn't going to let them dictate my life anymore. My life was mine to live, and I was going to live it on my terms. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I heard the car pull up. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. It was Michael. He stepped out of the car, looking the same as always, nervous, unsure of himself. I didn't even flinch. The power was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to give it up. He walked up to the porch and stood there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I didn't say anything at first, just watched him, letting him feel the weight of the silence between us. Mom, he started, his voice strained, I've been thinking a lot. About everything. I didn't respond. I wasn't in a rush to hear his excuses. After a long pause, he continued, I know I've been distant. And I know I hurt you. I didn't know how to handle everything. It all happened so fast. I looked at him, my gaze steady, but my mind was already far ahead. He was playing his cards, trying to get me to soften, to forgive him. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Michael, I said, finally breaking the silence. This isn't about what happened fast or slow. This is about respect. Something you and Janet have never shown me. His face faltered at that, and I could see the guilt creeping in. I had expected that. They were used to me being the one who forgave, the one who overlooked their mistakes. But I had changed. I wasn't going to overlook it this time. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Michael said, his voice quiet now. I just want things to go back to normal. I want us to be a family again. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to decide that, Michael, I said, my voice firm. I'm the one who gets to decide. I've spent too many years being invisible to you and Janet. It's time for me to live my life for me. He stood there for a long time, not saying anything. I could feel the tension, the frustration building in him, but I wasn't going to back down. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. Finally, he spoke again, his voice soft but resolute. I understand, he said. I just hope one day you can forgive me. Maybe, I said, my voice steady. But not today. And with that, I stood up and walked inside, leaving him standing there on the porch, just like he had left me standing alone for so many years. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. Michael didn't call again, and Janet stayed out of the picture. I knew they were both processing what had happened, trying to figure out how to fix things on their terms. But I wasn't going to let them. I had already made my choice, and nothing was going to change that. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my lawyer, confirming everything we had discussed regarding the estate and the assets. The $28 million was mine, locked away, and untouchable. I hadn't told Michael about it yet, and I wasn't sure I would. I didn't need to. They thought they knew what was best for me, but they didn't. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how far they had gone to manipulate me, to make me feel small and powerless. But I wasn't small, and I wasn't powerless. I was standing tall, finally, in my own life. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. What mattered now was my peace. I had fought for it, and I was going to keep it. The days ahead would bring challenges, I knew that. But they wouldn't break me. I had already broken free, and no one could take that away from me. The weeks that followed felt like an endless cycle of silence and tension. Michael and Janet's attempts to smooth things over had stopped, and I was certain they were both rethinking their approach. But I wasn't in a hurry to make peace. I had done enough of that in my life. Now, it was time for me to keep moving forward. I had made the decision to live on my terms, and no one was going to take that from me. The house was still the same, but something inside me had changed. I was different. The quiet strength I had been searching for was finally within me, and I wasn't going to let go of it. I spent my days doing things I hadn't had time for in years. I went to the garden and spent hours tending to the flowers I had planted with John so many years ago. I even started taking long walks around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in forever. It was in these small moments, surrounded by nature and peace, that I felt the most alive. But the past was never far behind. I could still feel the sting of betrayal when I saw Michael's name on my phone or when I remembered Janet's cold words. I wasn't angry anymore, though. Anger was for people who still cared, for people who still had something to lose. I had nothing left to lose. I had everything I needed right here, in my hands. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old papers in the attic, I came across a box of letters. They were from John, from the early days of our marriage. I smiled softly as I read through them, remembering how we used to write to each other when we were apart. The letters were full of love, of promises made and promises kept. But as I continued reading, I came across something that caught my eye. It was a letter John had written to me years ago, just before he was diagnosed. In it, he talked about his plans for our future, about how he wanted us to live out our golden years together. He spoke about the house, about the life we had built. And then, he wrote something that made my heart skip a beat. If anything happens to me, he had written, I want you to have everything. I want you to be happy, Patricia. Don't let anyone take that from you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. It was like John was still here, reminding me of everything I had fought for. He knew, even then, that I would need this. He knew that I would have to fight for myself, for the life we had planned together. It was a reminder, a push to keep going. Michael and Janet had no idea what they were dealing with. They thought they could take everything from me, that I would just roll over and let them. But they didn't know the woman they were up against. I wasn't the same person I had been when they were in control. I was stronger now. I was smarter now. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. The next time I saw Michael, it wasn't about words. It wasn't about arguments or apologies. It was about silence, the kind of silence that spoke louder than anything else. He came over one afternoon, his hands in his pockets, his eyes avoiding mine. He looked like a man who had been defeated, a man who had realized he had no power over me anymore. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to remind him of the past or tell him what he had done wrong. I just stood there, in the doorway, watching him. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I've been a fool. I didn't answer him right away. I didn't need to. He knew exactly what he had done. I don't need your apology, Michael, I said after a long moment. I don't need anything from you anymore. His eyes flickered with pain, but I didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. I've made my peace, I continued. And I'm not going to let you or Janet take anything from me. Michael stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. He turned and walked away without another word. That was the moment I knew. The moment I knew I had won. Not because of the house or the money, but because I had taken back my life. I had found my strength, my peace, and no one could take that from me. The rest of the days blurred together after that. Michael and Janet stayed distant, unsure of how to navigate this new version of me. But I didn't care. I had nothing to prove. I was free. The weight I had carried for so many years had finally lifted, and for the first time in my life, I could breathe easy. I had found my own way, and no one could take that from me.